If we summarize what we learned from seeing the tit-for-tat Pavlov and a few others like tit-for-entats and so on do quite well, where others, bully strategies, tester strategies, tranquilizer strategies, various others that involve defection on the first round, actually do very badly in these tournaments, what can we learn? There are several things that make for a good strategy. The first is be nice. I think it's quite striking that being nice is in our culture maybe the most important virtue that we talk about, even though it's missing from ancient discussions altogether. There's something a bit like it with kindness, in Confucius, for example, but overall, it's just missing from the ancient texts. Why? And why is it so important to us? Well, I think because of this. It really pays off for you in the long run to never defect first. Start by cooperating. And all the successful strategies involve that beginning. You start by cooperating. Secondly, be optimistic about the possibility of cooperation. If somebody's cooperating, keep cooperating. Don't be the first to defect. Nice rules do well with one another. They're hard to invade. If you've got a bunch of people who are nice, who are cooperating, and you come in with your strategy of defection, either all the time or sometimes, or start acting like a bully, you're not going to succeed in that group. There is a norm of cooperation. If you violate it, you're not going to do well. So these do really well with one another. It makes them very hard to invade with a different kind of strategy to take over. As long as there are enough of them, they tend to win. Well, if there aren't enough of them, on the other hand, they can just be strangled by the defectors around them. So it really matters. Are there enough other people around you that you can cooperate with? If not, you're going to lose. But if there are, you're going to win. And then finally, well, that does explain why being nice is such an important virtue. It involves the possibility of cooperation with you and the likelihood of a fruitful interaction over time with you. And so it's maybe the first thing that people ask. Is he nice? Is she nice? Why are those questions so important? Because they tell you something crucial about the future prospects for interaction with that person. Here's a second characteristic of a good strategy. It's clear. Others can understand the strategy. They know what you're doing. Now, if it is a competitive setting, you often want to be unpredictable. You want to be random, but not if it's a question of cooperation. You don't want it to be random, to think, well, should I confide in that person? Should I invite them to be part of my team? I don't know. They're pretty unpredictable. Unpredictability is not a good thing if we're thinking about prospects for cooperation. So one way of looking at it is this. If others don't understand what you're doing, they can't respond appropriately. There are going to be a lot of inappropriate and destructive interactions. Too much complexity can look like chaos. People can't figure out what you're up to. And so it will look like you're behaving rather randomly. It's important to be predictable enough and clear enough that other people know what you're up to. Now here's the part that may be less pleasant to find out about. You've got to be retaliatory. You've got to punish bad behavior. A strategy that doesn't punish, that doesn't retaliate, is easily exploited. And so the bully finds a victim. Man, that bully can pound away, can win, while the poor victim loses throughout. And so it's important not to allow bullies to push you around and victimize you. Consequently, you've got to have some way of punishing defection. If people defect and there are no consequences, badness results. Now, how often should you punish? How sternly? How forgiving should you be? That depends on the environment. Sometimes you should be quite forgiving because after all, well, for a variety of reasons, there may be a possibility of miscommunication, you may be misjudging intentions. It might be that, all right, everybody has a lapse now and then, and it's best if that person is forgiven because there are lots of future prospects for cooperation. But if you think that in this situation there are future prospects for cooperation, you might as well punish more significantly. So this really depends on the details of the game. Finally, it's important that a strategy be forgiving. We've got to be able to recover lost cooperation. A strategy that says, cross me once and you're over. I defect from now on with you. That's a tough strategy because once you lose, once you get into that pattern of defection, you never get out. And that can easily happen with bully settings or with situations where we've got, let's say, the devil who is constantly defecting. There's nothing rational to do except keep defecting. You never get back to cooperation. And so it's just mutually destructive all the time. We've got to have some way of forgiving and getting back to cooperation that's been lost as a result of defection and retaliation. Otherwise, you get into these destructive cycles of mutual retaliation, and that's really brutal, really destructive in the long run. Again, how forgiving should you be? That depends on the environment. If you're surrounded by bullies, maybe you shouldn't be very forgiving. If, on the other hand, you're surrounded by people who are mostly cooperative but have occasional lapses, it's better to be pretty forgiving. There is one last strategy suggestion I have, and that is don't be envious. That is to say, don't compare yourself to others one-on-one. Pavlov and tit for tat tend to lose these one-on-one confrontations. You look at each simultaneous play, well, tit for tat does well, Pavlov does well, but actually they don't do quite as well as the other player. And if you become obsessed with that, those kinds of one-on-one comparisons, you're going to upset yourself for one thing, you're going to then adopt a strategy that is not very productive in the long run. So tit for tat succeeds, Pavlov succeeds. Why? Because they don't focus on those one-on-one interactions, those individual plays. Instead, they focus on the larger picture. So don't be envious. Envy is self-destructive. Instead of comparing yourself to others, you want to think, given the strategies of others, are you doing as well as possible? Tit for tat doesn't beat the other player. It often loses to the other player. At most, it ties. But it elicits behavior that serves both players well. So it keeps generating win-win situations. And even if the other player in that situation wins a little more than you do, doesn't matter, because you're winning consistently over time. You're constantly creating win-win situations. Other strategies create a lot of lose-lose situations. And so you're much better off. Even though you're not winning each individual exchange, you are winning over the long haul.